Hey guys, Thomas the Solar Genie here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie Evil Dead Rise. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal where you can help support me and my channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server where you can join, collab, and do all that cool stuff, and sharing will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Evil Dead Rise. So, just a little bit of setup. I have seen the trailer for this movie a quite number of times before actually seeing the movie come out, and of course I gave it a little bit of breathing room just to get my notes in order, and of course I had a lot of other stuff going on. With all of that out of the way, I can get into the story and plot and all that character stuff and review it as objectively as possible. Alright, so the movie begins with a little old pier scene where we see a woman get Joan faked out spook scared. We learn that at least two of these individuals are named Caleb and Jessica, though I don't know how relevant their names are going to be for that much longer. Jessica goes on to go to her, I believe it's her sister, and her sister seems to be like in a fetal position until Jessica looks at this book, and then the sister is like reading what she's reading on the page, and falls over and begins to have some sort of spasm. We then see this woman be possessed and scalp Jessica's head, like the top of it. So not quite enough to potentially kill. Could have been a kill though. But as she makes her way out, the possessed woman does, she injures herself on the drone and then falls in the water, taking the guy with her into the water. And we see just a pool of blood erupt and a head that jettisons out of the water, and then we see this woman begin to float. We then cut to Beth, this young woman who seems to be some sort of DJ or something, I think is sort of the indication of where she is. But nonetheless, she has a sister, which is the mom character we see in the poster, the one that ends up getting possessed here. And we see the kids here as well. We have Bridget, the daughter, who's her character is her son is Dan, or this is a shortening of his name anyway, and the youngest daughter is shortened from Case, like Casey. So anyways, and her little intro is like her cutting the head off of one of her dolls and believing in spirits and stuff or something of that nature. So we see the sister, Bridget, come over. Beth, sorry. I got those two names confused in my notes sometimes, so I do apologize if I do that from time to time between those two. Just to clarify, Bridget is the daughter, Beth is the aunt of the... just to clarify right now, just in case I do that mistake again. Anyway. So as we progress, we see that the family's just having some time, and we get some jump scares when the sister arrives. And we know that the father seemingly is out of the picture, for whatever reason. He's just collecting, like, giving money from at a distance is, I think, the amount of information we get about him. And we learn that Beth was dealing with her own stuff, being away at work, and missed the mom's call twice. So her and the mom sit down and have a nice little chat. However, as we are sort of following this family very briefly, an earthquake quickly occurs, which creates a hole as we see the rest of the family just out and returning from, like, getting food. And from there, we see that Dan sees a suspicious hole and decides to check it out, investigate. And he finds a mysterious bank vault, and where he finds this old cassette-like player thing, or a vinyl, or whatever it is, and is also quickly spooked by a falling Jesus. And as he opens this sort of little lockbox, he's spooked by these locusts, and then spots a little book. So he decides to stash all that stuff away. We see one of their neighbors, Gabe, checking on them just to make sure everything is fine and dandy after the earthquake, and the family reunites pretty shortly after. And I'm a little bit surprised at this point that, no one's calling. I mean, maybe I don't know enough about earthquakes, but do people usually not call, like, the police just to make sure, like, or, like, I don't know, like, the fire department or something around earthquake areas? Like, I don't live in an area that usually typically has earthquakes, so I really don't know. So I do apologize for my lack of knowledge in this. So do people just usually not, worry about that stuff? Regardless of that, there are later points of the movie where that becomes a lot more infuriating, let me tell you. Anyway, Dan shows Bridget the book. And as the two are sort of looking at it, they sort of get obsessed by looking at the book. So decent acting in that regard to sort of, and tricky camera work there to sort of give off that vibe. But the daughter manages to pull them away from reaching, I guess, the end of the book. Not that I'm not sure what that would have done regardless, but whatever. All the while, Cass is getting ready to go in the tub, and has a little nice moment with Beth here. Meanwhile, Dan plays the two tapes that he found, or record things, and he uses his record scratching abilities to, like, distort the sound to normal, because it doesn't sound normal at first. And the individual talks about how the book is a book of the dead, and then once it starts going, he can't manage to get it to stop, especially on the second one, as he tries to, but is interfered with. And as we see that, we cut to the mom, and we see this outside force moving its way in through the air, like it's moving through the camera angle, and we see it approach and go into the mom. This is some sort of a demonic spell, as the movie is going to indicate relatively soon, so otherwise I'll just say that now. Anyways, so she's pulled around and hears some voices, and then gets pulled up by the cords in the elevator as she tries to make her way back up. and she is pulled and twisted, and presumably she is killed, quote unquote, at this point. And I put that in quotes, obviously, because that body is still used for the rest of the movie, just taken over by the demon from the majority of it. This is where we see the two kids, the two older siblings, see that the power is out only at their establishment. So, things are looking a little bit not great. Regardless. Meanwhile, Cass and Beth are looking for the mom. And the family all happens to gather up and see the mom enter in. And they immediately see some strange behavior as soon as she enters in. And the mom talks about cutting them all open and then vomits out. But they don't really have a lot of time to respond. As she proceeds to get ready to do some stuff here. But as they try to retreat, they see that the stairs below are gone. Like, they have just been taken out, presumably from the earthquake. So Gabe is there, returns, and we also see the old man. It's this old man that also lives in another residence, make his way outside. Now with the, now that they have some distance from the mom at this point, and they see that the elevator, or the stairs rather, are out, at this point, I would have hoped that at least one of them would have tried to call, like, the fire department at this point of the movie. I mean, right, if you're stuck up there and you need, like, a way to get down, that would probably be the immediate go-to answer in this scenario. Regardless, Case wants their dad back. Meanwhile, Beth stays with the mom as they kind of assume that she's dead at this point. But she begins to hear her voice in the phone, and the mom abruptly sits up. And by the by, when the mom is quote-unquote dead, this is another time frame in which somebody should have probably called, because Gabe was with them, by the way, when this happens. Like, he helps, like, shut the eyes, and then, like, yeah, like, none of them call the police for any reason. So it's like, okay, so now this is starting to get a little frustrating here. So they hear that the mom is, like, agonizing as she reawakens. So they decide to try to put her in the tub. And she goes into the ceiling, and then they get all freaked out, because now it's very, very clear, if it wasn't before, that she's clearly possessed. And she crawls out being taken over, holding a glass shard, and decides to attack the sister. So Bridget calls out, but the mom then decides to turn and try to tackle Bridget. So Dan comes in and hits her with a chair. Gabe comes in again, and the demon mom attacks once again, and for him, it rips out his eye and spits it into the other neighbor's eye, which, like, he chokes in on it. Because they're, like, these other two neighbors of, like, this guy who I don't know, and this younger kid I also don't know. But since the mom is outside, Beth manages to lock the door. Now at this time, opportunity, I don't know, I feel like you would want to call the police as we see them just watching on as we see her attack and kill the boy, and they're just sort of watching and not doing anything about it, just watching and watching. And yeah, Gabe is not quite dead from his eye, but he gets his throat slit. And then she continues to just watch. This is Beth, by the way, who should have had, finagled a phone somehow and been calling, been like, hey, this is great stuff, like, it's going nuts here. And we see the old man come out with the rifle and try to shoot, but then he ends up getting dragged away. So it calls out. So she calls out to the demon, or looks out for it anyways. And now, with all of this going on, Bridget suspects that that it was Dan, who, from reading the book, that was what caused this calamity of events to even occur. So she's a little bit mad at him. So Dan shows Bridget the book. And while everyone's seemingly distracted, we see that Case is the only one near the youngest sibling, has abruptly been left alone, which is frustrating as hell. And then we hear singing from the other side of the door, and so she walks and approaches it and begins to open the door and even unlock it after the possessed mom convinces her that she's fine. But she clearly grabs Case pretty quickly here. Why she was left alone? I don't know. Like, how did that end up happening? That's like, especially when she was already possessed, you would think that at least one of the two other siblings, or Beth, one of those three, would have been like, stick with me, something, 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 I don't know. But here we are. So Bridget starts to hear voices because she was cut in the process of everything I've been pointing out. So she spits out some bugs. And yeah, it's not looking too good for her. So now Case is with somebody. Now she's with Dan. All the while, Beth sees Bridget on top of the stove. And at this point, Bridget has officially been taken over by the demon. So we have lost one of the three siblings in the process. So Beth knocks her out. And Jan joins to see this occurring, like the end event of it. And hey, Case actually gets a cool moment where she stabs possessed Bridget with the doll pike that we saw set up at the beginning of the movie. So there's that, I guess. So, Case tells Beth when they're alone that she'll be a great parent because she knows how to lie to kids when the situations are scary. And all the while, Dan has officially tied up Bridget just in case. Meanwhile, Beth goes into the room with the cassette and goes in alone and to hear what the things that Dan had heard previously, or like the next tape, like there was like 3 apparently. All the while, we see from the outside view the mom looking up for this cat that the old man owned in the vent, so the mom uses the vent to get into the house, or the room that she is in currently. So, she attacks, and they're like moving into the rooms, and then eventually switches targets to Dan. Dan is stabbed in the arm, and Dan is officially bloodied up, so he is in prime real estate to get possessed too. But he manages to burn her. All the while, the mom is, because this is referring to, by the way, Bridget, not the mom. And the mom's because again, the mom's coming in from another area, the vent. So, Beth Beth gets attacked by the mom. And we see that Dan is indeed, again, stabbed, like in the chest this time. Case is under the table, and we see this setup from her earlier, where she, like, slid the scissors underneath the room when the mom told her to not have them. So she slides the scissors over to Beth to help her out. This gives them some decent chunk of time, as the mom has to apparently recoup at this point, while other injuries have not had to have that happen, so inconsistencies. Oh joy. Beth grabs a gun, and the gun that he had, from because they make it out there, and shoots the mom with the rifle. But the old man wakes up possessed, and so too we see the others that have been killed in this hallway are all waking up too. So they run over Beth and Case over to the elevator, or like the, not the elevator, but like the, what's it called? It's like one of those things that you like send down stuff with, I guess. The chute, I believe it's called. I'm not sure why they didn't think to try to use that earlier when they saw the stairs were gone, and try to like look for help that way. Or like when they had the mom out. But whatever, we're here now, I guess. So, yeah. Anyways, the elevator fills up with blood, because I guess they can just move their powers like that, I guess, but the blood is able to, like, put enough weight in the, I was gonna call it an elevator at this point, and, like, shudders them downward. So they get into the parking lot, and they enter a car, and they have to use this, like, button to open up the gate, and it's, like, taking so long for it to, like, open up. And unfortunately, the car gets stopped by the earthquake pothole that was left behind. All the while, we see that the many demons that have been up there are coagulating into an amalgamation demon that we see in the book, and that the other demons were also alluded to in the book as well. So, well, I'll just call this one the amalgamation, because it sounds neat. So the mom and Case are the only two remaining, as they try to circle around the car as the amalgamation is like picks up a chainsaw that's there for some reason. Now I get it. Evil Dead is known for the chainsaw, like the original Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and that stuff. I know that a chainsaw is typically involved in these movies, but, like, still, you could have I think you could have, like, come on, you set up the other thing with the daughter having the pike. Like, why couldn't you set up the chainsaw a little bit more? Like, it feels like they just made it suddenly appear. I know it's not the case, but it feels that way, which is like, ugh, feels a little annoying. Beth has the gun, returns fire. The amalgamation grabs her, though. But Case moves it into like this wood chipper that's like in the middle of the area. And the sister, I forget how she gains access to the chainsaw, but she does, just to save some time here. And uses it to push the amalgamation into the wood chipper to like disembody it. And then the last remaining segment of the amalgamation is the bomb, which he kicks into the wood chipper, which it all bleeds out. And so she takes Case's hand and then decides to take the chainsaw with her as the two of them walk their way out. We then cut, as they leave, to a person who's from floor room 5, or from floor 5. I guess this is like the floor that was beneath there, so I'm assuming this whole movie, or the majority of it, took place on floor 6, position number. But we see the blonde woman who is possessed from the beginning of the movie, see the crime scene, see the blood scene rather, and then see the zoom in as if to insinuate that she was then possessed. So what we saw at the beginning was actually a prelogue, I guess, to the ending sequence here, or the movie is more like a prequel to the little event at the beginning, rather. Which is, I suppose, a little unique, but boy, is this movie a little bit messy, I will say. So it's a little bit frustrating. I thought that this movie would have a little bit more organization in it, have a little bit more character in it, quite frankly. The character work here is severely lacking. Like, the only thing I know about Dan is that he plays like, he is able to do the record scratching, and then the daughter has the weird doll obsession. Outside of those two things, I really can't say much else about any of the characters, really. I don't know much about Bridget as a character, or the sister, except that she's pregnant. And then the mom is the one who is being possessed, so we have the least to know about her in that regard. So yeah, this movie is definitely on the more frustrating end for me. I was expecting a lot more, and perhaps that was on me, because I'm so familiar with Evil Dead, and maybe I just haven't seen it in so long, like the first 2 Evil Dead movies. Because I remember, at least from my memory, again, maybe it's been too long, but I think I remember those movies being really, really good. Maybe they don't hold up as well as they used to. I'm not really sure. Can't really say without a rewatch. But for this movie, I will definitely say this one's a little bit of a disappointment. From the lack of character work here to just some of the character decisions being a little bit frustrating, especially when the escalation reaches the point where it's like, you should... By the way, they have cell phones on them, so there's really no excuse for them not to call the phone, like, at least try to call the police at some point of the movie, especially when things with the possessed moms start to expedite, let alone probably should have even tried to attempted to do so even prior. Again, maybe that one's out of my understanding of like how people react in like earthquake situations. So I'll sort of suggest that maybe that's a thing, maybe it's not, but the second half definitely is still more frustrating regardless. So in terms of a score, I think I'm actually going to go with a 5 out of 10 or even a 4 out of 10. Quite frankly, again, this movie isn't as good as I thought it was going to be based off of, again, I guess, sort of from the familiarity and just what I was sort of expecting versus the lack of really any character work or there were some gruesome moments, sure, but I don't know. I feel like Evil Dead could typically is known for doing a little bit more work than that. Again, maybe it's again, I could be wrong. It's again been so long since I've seen Evil Dead, so maybe it's not as good as I remember. Maybe it's just there to be like a, haha, those people are dead now. Blood, blood, blood. I don't know. Could be the case. Could be the case. So yeah, I'd probably stick with a 4 out of 10 with this one. And that's my review of Evil Dead Rise. If you ended up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second, third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth, to my Discord server. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated, and you can join that Discord to join. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.